My brother hated me. Whenever he saw me, his face would always freeze over as he told me to get the hell away from him. Later, I was murdered by a woman obsessed with him, and my body was dumped into the bottom of the ocean. Right before I died, she smiled and taunted me. "Wanna guess why your brother hates you? It's because he found out you have unnatural feelings for him. He thinks you're disgusting." As a ghost, I watched her go back, fake absolute heartbreak, and slowly inch her way into my brother's life. That is, until the day he found the love letter I had written to him, hidden away in my drawer. That was when her nightmare truly began. The day Meredith killed me, I was still in the middle of a fight with Henry. He had told me that since we weren't blood-related, he never considered me his sister. My heart trembled with an agonizing ache. I was just thankful we were fighting over the phone, so he couldn't see my devastatingly heartbroken expression. Forcing myself to be tough, I snapped back, saying that was perfect, because he wasn't my brother either, and we were nothing but enemies. After hanging up, I blocked his number. When I looked up, the light in front of me darkened. My best friend, Meredith, was glaring at me with a hideous expression I had never seen before. "Go to hell, Stella," she spat. She grabbed me by the throat and raised a sharp rock. She brought it down, again and again, smashing it against my temple. A surging wave of excruciating pain sent my entire body into convulsions. Blood streamed down my cheeks, dyeing my vision in an overwhelming, absolute red. In my last moments of consciousness, I watched as she pulled out a small knife and slashed my face until it was completely unrecognizable. She smiled and mocked me, saying there was actually no need to destroy my face, because even if I went missing, no one would come looking for me anyway. "Henry," she laughed, "we've been friends for years. Don't I know exactly how much your brother despises you?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Only a gurgling stream of fresh blood spilled from the open wound on my throat. Seeing me like this, the smile on Meredith's lips widened. "Oh, right. Wanna guess why your brother hates you?" she asked. "It's because he found out you have unnatural feelings for him. He thinks you're disgusting." Henry had found out I was in love with him, and he thought I was disgusting. That was the very last thought that drifted through my mind before I died. After I died, my soul didn't immediately dissipate. Floating in the air, I watched Meredith tie rocks to my broken corpse and sink it to the bottom of the sea. It was an unfamiliar stretch of coastline, far from any city, entirely devoid of security cameras or human presence. Her systematic destruction of the evidence went completely unnoticed. I watched her take my phone and board a flight back home. Even though her lips never moved, I heard her voice echo. "This should be fine now, right?" "It's perfectly fine," an unfamiliar voice replied. "Now that Stella is out of the way, you can safely pursue your target." "It's not just to complete the protocol," Meredith thought, biting her lip, her cheeks flushing with what looked like genuine shyness. "I really do like him." It took me a few seconds to realize I was hearing Meredith's inner thoughts. It turned out she was in love with my brother, and she seemed to be bound by some sort of protocol or system that was helping her get close to him. The voice assured her that with her great personality, and not being a troublemaker like me, Henry would definitely fall for her. How could Stella even compare to me? Meredith scoffed inwardly. She's just a dark, twisted freak who secretly hoards her brother's shirts to sleep with in her dorm. Henry avoiding her is definitely because just looking at her makes him sick to his stomach. I had always known I wasn't normal. I harbored the dirtiest, most shameful desires for my brother. The last time I saw Henry was on my 21st birthday. Just like always, he had a dozen custom gowns sent over for me to choose from, and threw a lavish birthday party for me. But he outright refused to see me. I navigated through the flashing lights of the living room and the pool area, and unsurprisingly, found his car parked outside. Through the half-open window, he froze for a moment when he saw me. In a faint, distant tone, he told me I should be inside celebrating with my friends. Swallowing back the words I actually wanted to say, I put on a sarcastic tone instead. I told him I just came out to check, since he didn't even show his face at my party. I figured he might have died out here. He turned his head slightly and asked if I was disappointed to see him alive. Of course, I sneered. After all, if you were really dead, the entire Hartwell fortune would be mine. I'd have to pop some champagne to celebrate. Henry fell silent. The streetlights were dim and couldn't penetrate the interior of the car. More than half of his face was submerged in shadows, making his expression unreadable. In that moment, I actually felt a wave of relief that I couldn't see him clearly. That way, I wouldn't have to look at the blatant disgust in his eyes. I knew Henry hated me. When I was 14, my mother died instantly in a car crash while arguing with his father. Ever since then, every time we met, he would put on a cold face and tell me to stay away from him. Not to be outdone, I would snap back, asking if he thought I actually wanted to be near him, and that just eating at the same table made me nauseous. Back and forth, the tension between us only grew tighter. To avoid seeing me, Henry even moved out of the old Hartwell estate where he had lived for over a decade. A man as perpetually calm and rational as him couldn't even maintain basic decency when faced with me. He probably loathed me to the absolute limit but couldn't completely shake me off. I had wondered countless times what Henry would think if I died. Would he feel even a shred of sadness? Or would he smile and tell everyone that since we weren't related by blood, my death only brought him a sense of relief? Henry still didn't know I was dead. It was only when he tried to message me about my post-graduation plans that he realized I had blocked him. Knowing my strange personality and that Meredith was my only true friend from all 4 years of college, he sought her out. Drifting in the air, I watched him approach her. Politely and distantly, he asked if she could contact me. Meredith bit her lip, looking at him with an expression of feigned hesitation. He added that she had probably seen him around, introducing himself as my brother, Henry Hartwell. "Stella said you aren't her brother," Meredith blurted out, before immediately covering her mouth in a perfectly acted display of regret for letting it slip. Henry froze abruptly. After a moment, he calmly asked what else I had told her about him. Meredith hesitated, then said I claimed to hate him, that I was just enduring college to finally get far away from him, hoping we'd never see each other again for the rest of our lives. She twisted the knife further, adding that I said his father had killed my mother, making us destined enemies, and that I only wished he would die sooner. No, that's not true. I desperately wanted to refute her, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make a single sound. Henry listened quietly. His long eyelashes fluttered, and then dropped, concealing every trace of emotion in his eyes. I wondered if he was thinking back to our argument outside the old estate on my birthday, when I told him I'd pop champagne if he died. At that thought, I hovered blankly in midair as a tidal wave of regret drowned me. That wasn't it, Henry. I was just terrified that you would see right through my dark, hidden, dirty desires. You hated me enough already, and I just couldn't bear to make things any more humiliating. I know. She has always hated me. After a long pause, Henry's pale face finally managed a slight curve of the lips. He politely asked if she would do him the favor of contacting him regularly to update him on how I was doing. As Meredith put on a hesitant act, he gently added that she didn't need to tell me. He just wanted to ensure I was safe. Of course, Meredith agreed. That was her goal from the start. To make things easier, Henry even arranged a position for her at the Hartwell Group. I watched her use my phone to text herself, only to go to Henry after work every day to spin lies about how I had found a job in another city and was doing wonderfully. Having lived with me for 4 years, she knew me well, and with the system protocol's help, Henry never seemed to doubt her words. Half a month later, Meredith told him that I had met a man I liked and had already started dating him. Henry went completely rigid in his chair. After a moment, he let out a slow breath and stood up. Stopping at the door, he looked back and asked if I had mentioned what kind of person this man was. In the dim, ambient light of a bar, Henry had already downed more than half a bottle of brandy. His usually piercing eyes, normally as calm as a still lake, were now clouded with intoxication. In the booth across from him, Meredith was detailing the fictional man she had invented, claiming we were co-workers. Henry rested his chin on his hand, listening quietly for a long time before suddenly offering a faint smile. "That's good then," he said. He thanked her for letting him know and told her it was getting late, suggesting she head home. Softening her voice, Meredith pointed out he had drunk too much to drive and offered to take him home instead. Under the dim lights, her exquisitely made-up face carried a clear hint of seduction. Inwardly, she celebrated finally getting him drunk, noting it was an opportunity she couldn't miss. The voice in her head agreed, calling it a classic romantic script to trap him with a drunken night. Swelling with triumph, she drove his black Bentley straight to his apartment building without a hitch. Suddenly, Henry opened his eyes in the passenger seat. Though heavily intoxicated, his tone carried a sharp edge of scrutiny as he noted how familiar she seemed with the route to his home. A flash of panic crossed Meredith's eyes before she quickly suppressed it, stammering that she had heard me mention it before. Henry didn't reply. He just watched her silently as she parked the car and followed him all the way upstairs. As he unlocked the door, he politely told her it wasn't safe for her to go back alone so late, offering her the apartment he owned downstairs for the night. Biting her lip as if making a bold decision, she lunged forward into his arms, starting to confess her feelings. But before she could finish, her purse slipped off her arm and hit the floor during the brief struggle. The unzipped bag spilled its contents everywhere. Henry reflexively glanced down, and the light from the entryway fell perfectly onto the phone she had stolen from me. Henry's head snapped up. The air in the room seemed to instantly freeze. Meredith completely stiffened under his chilling, razor-sharp glare. In a blind panic, she screamed in her mind for the system to wipe his memory of the night. The voice warned her that the bulk of her credit had been spent cleaning up the traces of my murder, and this would exhaust her final limit. Do it, she confirmed without hesitation. In the very next second, Henry's eyes glazed over with indifference, and as if he couldn't even see her, he turned and walked into his bedroom. When Henry woke up, he sat in a daze for a long time. Countless emotions flowed through the depths of his eyes like a turbulent river before settling into utter detachment. I watched him pick up his phone and call her, apologizing for the previous night and blaming it on the alcohol before asking to meet and talk. Hanging up, he stood and headed out the door. They met at a cafe downstairs from his company. It was then I finally realized what she had replaced his memories with. Stuttering with her ears flushed red, Meredith spun a tale about how she tried to leave after dropping him off, but he had suddenly lunged and held her, and she hadn't pushed him away. Nicely done, the system's voice praised. Henry sat across from her with his eyes cast down. Sunlight streamed through the window onto his face, rendering his cold, pale skin nearly translucent, while his eyes remained as dark as an ocean vortex. Hearing her story, he slightly raised a hand, leaned forward, and with an apologetic tone, promised to take responsibility. If you don't mind, let's be together, he offered. Henry. I curled into a tight ball in the air, tears falling the moment I opened my mouth to beg him not to be with her because she had murdered me. My voice dissolved into the ether, unheard by anyone but myself. Henry certainly couldn't hear it. Wearing a gentle smile, he openly brought Meredith back to the company. Within half a day, the gossip spread wildly. Meredith was going to be the boss's wife. She was the sister's best friend, and when asked why the sister didn't work there, rumors whispered that he deeply loathed me. Bound by intense guilt over the fabricated memory, Henry brought Meredith into his inner circle, taking her to galas and introducing her to powerful friends. He answered everyone's curiosity without hesitation, formally introducing her as his girlfriend. It was a level of open validation I had never received in life or death. At a dazzlingly lit banquet, his drunk friend Brian suddenly brought up how he hadn't seen me in a long time. Meredith stiffened but quickly recovered, smoothly lying that I was working out of state and had a boyfriend now. Brian acted surprised, nearly slipping up before catching Henry's eye and dropping whatever he was about to say. When Meredith pressed him, he brushed it off and pivoted to complimenting how well she and Henry suited each other. Everyone could see how good Henry was to her, and Meredith felt it too. Except for the fact that he maintained a rigid, polite physical distance, denying her even a single kiss. After the banquet, Henry dodged her attempt at a kiss, stating calmly that since he had violated her while drunk, he wouldn't touch her again until they were married. Meredith was stunned for a moment before her voice trembled with excitement as she asked if he was proposing. Yes, he replied, pulling out a ring and looking at her deeply. Will you marry me? While inwardly screaming with joy alongside the system protocol over the smooth progress, she put on a hesitant face, worrying aloud about how I would react. At the mention of me, his expression turned icy. He coldly stated that since we shared no blood, I had no right to dictate his marriage, and told her to simply notify me to attend the engagement party. A sharp, Piercing agony radiated from the depths of my soul, causing my very essence to fade slightly. I had a sudden premonition that 2 more waves of such pain would scatter my consciousness from this world entirely. I drifted into his office, where he sat expressionlessly at his desk, and called his name from afar. Unseen and unheard, I floated down to settle lightly into his lap, carefully pressing my lips against his cheek. It was something I only ever dared to do in my dreams when I was alive. Back then, every encounter we had ended in bitter hostility. Henry hated me, and I worked tirelessly to project absolute loathing for him in return. Nobody knew that in my unspeakable, romantic teenage fantasies, my brother and I were incredibly intimate. He would pull me onto his lap, kissing my neck, huskily demanding me to let him look at me. I would wake up with burning cheeks, my back drenched in sticky sweat. "Are you a freak, Stella? He's your brother. So what? We aren't related." These 2 drastically conflicting thoughts constantly tore my heart apart. Tormented by this, I had written him a long love letter. But that night, when I knocked on his door, his face was bathed in shadows as he calmly asked what I wanted. When I asked to come inside to talk, his tone grew even more distant, offering a flat refusal. My hand brushed against the love letter hidden in my nightgown pocket, sparking a sliver of courage. Softening my voice to whine like I did when we were kids, I started. "I know you're my brother, but I..." Before I could finish, he slammed the door shut. Through the wood, his cold voice drifted out. "Don't call me your brother." Standing there in a daze, the reality crashed over me that with his father and my mother both dead from that crash, we had absolutely zero connection left. Of course he wouldn't want me as a sister anymore. "Stella." The sudden, hoarse voice yanked me from my memories. I snapped to attention and saw Henry staring fixedly right at my face. For a split second, I almost believed he could see my soul. He closed his eyes, his voice trembling as he called my name again. Realizing what he was looking at, I whipped my head around. On his desk sat a framed photograph, glowing with layers of radiant pink and purple. It was from when I was 14, before the tragedy struck the Hartwell family. He and I were standing in the courtyard of the old estate in front of a sprawling wall of blooming roses. It was the last truly intimate photo we would ever take together. I always remembered that it was an ordinary Wednesday evening. I walked out of the school gates and instantly spotted him in the crowd. His expression was locked in a severe coldness that only softened slightly when his eyes met mine. "I'm taking you to the hospital. If you're scared, hold my hand tight," he said. The sunset dragged a trail of blood red across the horizon. It wasn't until dusk had been entirely devoured by the night that I managed to piece together the truth from the murmurs of the people around us. His father had been keeping a young mistress for 2 years, and she had recently gotten pregnant. He planned to divorce my mother after the baby was born, but she found out early. They fought in the car, lost control of the steering wheel, and crashed into an oil tanker, triggering a massive explosion. Beneath the white sheets lay 2 charred, unrecognizable bodies. The second my eyes shifted toward them, my vision went black as his cool palm covered my eyes. Leaning down to my ear, Henry whispered, "Don't look, Stella, it'll scare you." He was only 19 at the time, yet he managed everything with cold, decisive efficiency, arranging the funerals, kicking his father's crying mistress out of the house, and taking sole command of the Hartwell group. By the time I could even process it all, we had already reached that devastating night. When my mother was alive, she constantly complained about my weird temper. Behind closed doors, she would twist my ear and fiercely hiss that I was a complete psychopath just like my biological father. "I'm warning you, Stella, if you dare cause any trouble in the Hartwell house, I won't hold back," she threatened. In front of Henry and his father, she never missed an opportunity to suppress me, forcing me to eat things I hated. "Broccoli is nutritious, so you are going to finish it, you hear me?" she would say. Just as I was gripping my fork, debating whether to shove the plate away, Henry suddenly reached over, speared the broccoli, and moved it onto his own plate. "Stella can eat whatever she wants," he said coldly. "In our house, we don't force people to eat things they hate." My mother offered him a fawning smile, saying I was just a girl with a strange temper since childhood. Henry's voice dropped even colder as he replied that it was normal for a little girl to have a temper, and having watched me grow up, he didn't find me strange at all. I was very young when my mother married into the Hartwell family, and she was too busy desperately pleasing her new husband to care for me. Henry was 5 years older and essentially raised me himself. So, when I realized he was deliberately distancing himself from me later on, I had to construct a shell of hatred to hide behind, terrified he would discover my dirty, shameful desires. Henry and Meredith's engagement party was set on a luxurious private yacht, with hundreds of invitations sent to wealthy and powerful guests. Meredith was out of her mind with joy. I listened to her gloat inwardly over the 4-carat diamond ring he gave her, plotting how she would finally sleep with him in the yacht's grandest suite. She thought of me as a freak whose death was a blessing, believing we would have been together 3 years ago if I hadn't been in the way. The system warned her that once the party ended, the protocol would reach 100%, allowing her to live with him forever, but reminded her she still needed a solid excuse for my absence. As the date neared, Meredith lied to Henry, claiming I had thrown a tantrum upon hearing they were engaged and refused to attend. Henry didn't respond immediately. He just turned his head and stared at her quietly with eyes as cold and deep as the sea. Squirming uncomfortably, she called his name. "Tell her I am her brother," he commanded coldly. "As long as she is alive, she must attend my engagement party." Drifting in the air, I looked at him in total despair. "I can't come to your party. I'm already dead. You would probably never know that your fiancée murdered me with her own hands and dumped my body into the sea." Brother. The day before the engagement, while Meredith was at the boutique trying on custom gowns, Henry returned to the old estate, saying he needed to fetch a precious, one-of-a-kind necklace for her. I watched him walk through the door, go upstairs, and push open the door to the easternmost room on the second floor. It was my bedroom. He hadn't stepped foot inside since moving out 5 years ago. A sudden realization struck me, and a pain like a twisting knife shot through my chest, making me convulse. "Don't give her my necklace. Henry, don't let her wear the coming-of-age gift you gave me. Please no, she's a murderer." My shrill, hoarse screams echoed in the room, but no one could hear them but me. My spirit lunged through the light and air to the vanity, desperately trying to block the drawer, but it was useless. He pulled it open and retrieved the jewelry box. Just before my 18th birthday, he had flown to London to win an $8 million pink diamond necklace at Sotheby's as my coming-of-age gift. Our relationship was already incredibly strained by then. Even though I was secretly thrilled to receive it, I purposely mocked him, saying I didn't dare accept it because he'd probably demand it back with interest later. Henry had coolly replied that he didn't mind if I wanted to pay him back, and that he had several plans in mind if I wanted to hear them. "What? Are you going to marry me off to a business partner?" I had challenged. Snapped back to reality, I watched him pull out the dazzling, pink diamond. He tugged at the corner of his mouth, letting out a small, self-deprecating chuckle as he noted that no one but him could ever tolerate my temper. The next second, his gaze dropped and locked onto something, as if he had been suddenly frozen solid. At the very bottom of the jewelry box lay the letter I had written late one night years ago, the one I had never found the courage to give him. The envelope bore only his name in my handwriting. Henry. The Henry the First knew was the absolute pinnacle of calm and rationality, never once losing his composure through all our bitter clashes. But in that moment, he stared blankly at the envelope, his fingertips trembling as he breathed my name. Gripping the necklace, he opened the letter I thought would remain forever sealed away in time, hidden at the bottom of the box. "Would you find it disgusting? Your sister isn't normal. When she's sarcastically mocking you to your face, all she's thinking about in her head is how to strip you naked. I'm doomed, Henry. I think I really am a dirty freak. What do I do?" Floating behind him, I looked at the slightly faded ink on the paper, feeling completely stripped bare. My deepest, darkest secrets were entirely exposed. I closed my eyes in unbearable humiliation, actually grateful he couldn't see me. Suddenly, a dark, wet spot bloomed on the paper, blurring the ink. Realizing what it was, I drifted to his front and was immediately met with the sight of his red, tear-filled eyes. Henry. It was late into the night when he finally returned with the necklace. His expression was as impeccably indifferent as ever, showing zero flaws. Meredith hurried over, whining about where he had been and why he was so late. He simply told her he went to get the necklace. When she nervously asked if he minded that she had bought several dresses because she loved them all, he looked down at her and offered a slight, tight smile, telling her that as long as she liked them, it was fine. He took a few steps toward the bathroom before pausing and turning back. He mentioned that the necklace was a former belonging of a deceased British royal, a rare, one-of-a-kind piece worldwide, and that it was originally a gift for me. It would be better if you invited her over to personally give it to you, he suggested. As he spoke, his gaze remained fixed on her face, loaded with quiet, penetrating scrutiny. Blinded by her smooth progress with the protocol, Meredith completely let her guard down. Hearing how valuable the necklace was, a spark of greed flashed in her eyes. She eagerly insisted it was fine, assuring him that since we were such good friends, I would definitely agree to give it to her. Henry fell silent. His eyes, cold and sharp as blades, swept over her features inch by inch, as if trying to slice her open to the bone. For a fraction of a second, I almost saw a flash of unshed tears in the pitch-black depths of his eyes before Meredith confusedly asked what was wrong. Forcing a difficult curve to his lips, he asked if this meant she still refused to show up to her own brother's engagement party. Meredith nodded, putting on a fake show of comfort, telling him not to be angry and promising to persuade me again. No need, he said expressionlessly. Even if she doesn't come, I'll find a way to see her. I suddenly understood. He had been using his rapid relationship progression with Meredith to force my hand into showing up. Because he genuinely believed I was still alive. He clung to the hope that she had simply locked me away or hidden me somewhere. He had no idea I was already dead. As the de facto ruler of the Hartwell Group, his engagement ceremony was grand to the absolute extreme. The yacht anchored in international waters, and beneath the glittering ambient lights, his sharp features looked softened in his tailored suit. Standing beside him, Meredith wore a rhinestone-encrusted mermaid gown and a blindingly radiant diamond necklace around her slender neck. Drunk on her success, she believed she was merely one step away from finishing the protocol. She relished the thought that by tomorrow, the world would know her as his fiancée, gloating that his willingness to hand over my gift proved how much he hated me. Honestly, if I hadn't killed her and just made her watch the brother she loves fall for me, that probably would have been fun too, she mused to herself, basking in her twisted happiness. As if answering her thoughts, fireworks erupted across the sky, leaving everyone whispering about how Henry had lit up the city for the woman he loved. Drifting in the night air, I watched it all with hollow numbness. Suddenly, Brian practically sprinted over, his breathing hurried and a lingering panic in his eyes. Glancing warily at Meredith, he whispered to Henry that there was an emergency at the company. Turning his head, Henry excused himself, promising to be right back, which Meredith sweetly accepted without suspicion. The ocean swallowed the night, and the moonlight cascaded down like a heavy mist. By the deserted railing, Henry took a deep breath and ordered Brian to speak. Brian explained that after graduation, Meredith had left school first, followed by me the next day, and while their initial records showed no overlap, there was a glaring gap. For 3 days in early July, both of our movements had completely vanished from all records. Early July. Henry paused, suddenly recalling something. We had another fight that day. I wasn't a good brother. I always made her upset. He closed his eyes tightly before telling Brian to continue. A look of pity crossed Brian's face as he explained he had tapped into overseas contacts and found a local airport worker who recognized our photos together. Tracing the clues led to an abandoned beach, but ultimately, Brian hesitated before handing over a creased photograph, softly telling Henry to just look at it. Henry's eyes fell on the image, and it was as if he had been plunged into the Arctic, instantly freezing solid. The photo showed an endless ocean and a dilapidated fishing boat, its nets hauling up a bloated, completely mutilated, waterlogged corpse. Where the face should have been was an unrecognizable ruin, but just behind the ear, a patch of skin bearing a distinct, bright red birthmark was faintly visible. It was my body, Henry. Even as a mere soul, tears poured from my eyes, blurring my vision. I whispered gently, begging him not to cry, confessing that I had never actually hated him, but rather loved him so intensely that I simply didn't know what to do. Please don't think I'm disgusting. I had finally spoken the dark, terrifyingly heavy, unspeakable love aloud. But he couldn't hear it. He would never, ever hear it. The yacht docked. The guests filed off, leaving the grand banquet hall completely empty save for Henry, Meredith, and a few of his closest friends. Flushed from the alcohol, Meredith asked if they were going home. Henry smiled faintly, saying there was no rush, because he had prepared a surprise for her for their engagement night. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation as she sweetly praised how good he was to her. As the boat bobbed gently on the water, a sudden wave rocked the deck, causing Meredith to stumble in her high heels and collapse onto the floor. Scraping her elbow against the railing, she cried out in pain. Her tight mermaid gown trapped her legs, making it impossible to stand up on her own. So she looked up at him with a pitiful face, begging him to help her up. Suddenly, she let out a blood-curdling scream, her face instantly draining of all color. Henry had stepped forward and planted his foot squarely on her fingers, grinding them down with his full weight. Holding nothing back, her knuckles were crushed and mangled into a bloody pulp against the deck. She shrieked and sobbed, alternating between screaming curses and desperate begging, until the convulsive agony and cold sweat rendered her entirely voiceless. "Does it hurt?" Henry asked, looking down at her from above. "You thought you could pull off the perfect crime, even rewriting my memory, but you seem to have made one fatal miscalculation." "I have always remembered exactly what happened that night," he stated. "I kept you alive because I thought she was still living." His voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "How dare you kill her?" On the last word, he snapped her fingers completely under his shoe. Screaming in ultimate terror and agony, she sobbed that it wasn't her, denying she had killed me. Henry ignored her completely. His eyes were an abyss of dead stillness, floating with a bleak, desolate smile. "She had a bit of a temper, but she treated you like a true friend," he murmured. "How many messes did she clean up for you? If you wanted something, you could have just come to me. Why did you have to kill her?" Meredith screamed internally, begging the protocol system to isolate her pain receptors. The only response she got was a cold, mechanical voice announcing, "Protocol terminated. Progress reset to 0. You are on your own." The most agonizing pain in the world isn't dying. It's believing you've won everything, only to watch it all turn to ash right before the dawn breaks. Having received no further response from her system, Meredith seemed to fully shatter. She threw her head back, laughing so hard tears spilled over, screaming that she killed me because she loved him. "You wouldn't even look at me while she was around," she shrieked. She confessed not only to killing me but to destroying my face, yet viciously demanded to know if she was even wrong, calling me a sick freak, and asking if he knew what I said about him when I was drunk. Tensing her neck, she smiled a sweet, deeply malicious smile, looking like a venomous flower as she mimicked my lost, helpless tone. "Meredith, I can't hold on much longer." Instantly, the memory dragged me back 2 years ago to his birthday. I had handed him the tie and sapphire cufflinks I had spent months preparing, masking it with an indifferent sneer, telling him I just bought them randomly and he could take it or leave it. The dark blue tie draped softly over his pale, cold palm, resting right next to the small black mole by his thumb, a detail that carried a pulsing, subtle magnetism. Henry looked down at it for a moment before closing his hand and expressionlessly announcing that he would double my allowance for the next month. As he spoke, his Adam's apple bobbed slightly. I despairingly realized that even the most mundane gesture from him was enough to ignite my darkest, most illicit desires. Unable to speak, I simply stood up and marched toward the door. That night, I drank myself into a stupor, grabbing Meredith, who I still thought of as my best friend, and drunkenly slurred my confession. I told her I couldn't handle it anymore, that looking at him filled my head with nothing but the urge to rip his clothes off. Do you know what I was thinking when he was holding that tie today? I was wishing I could use it to bind his wrists. Now, Meredith was manically repeating that exact conversation. An overwhelming tidal wave of shame crashed over my entire being, making me terrified to even look at his face. "Do you get it now, Henry? Your sister isn't just some rebellious teenager. She's a disgusting freak." She was silenced by a sickening crack. Henry grabbed her by the hair and slammed her face mercilessly into the sharp edge of the staircase. Again and again. He didn't stop until her forehead was completely caved in, and her face was a mask of gore. Only then did he release her, taking a step back as she crumpled onto the deck like a sack of garbage. "A freak," he murmured. "But my thoughts have always been exactly the same as hers." His voice was so light it practically scattered into the sea breeze, but to me, it was a deafening thunderclap. My head snapped around to look at him standing by the railing, staring absently out at the dark ocean, looking at it as if it were a lover. He had a hauntingly beautiful face, sharp and undeniably breathtaking, though usually veiled by an aggressive, intimidating edge. Now, all of that edge was gone. His expression was a volatile mix of madness and shattering fragility, drowning in an all-consuming tide of remorse. Floating up to him, I closed the distance until we were face to face, slowly leaning in with tears streaming down to press my lips against his. "Henry, I love you," I whispered. But he couldn't see me, hear me, or feel me. "I should have just told her earlier, shouldn't I?" he muttered to himself. "Maybe if I had just been more selfish, more depraved. The second I realized my feelings, I would have just locked her up beside me like I did in my dreams, never letting her leave. Maybe she would have hated me even more, but at least she would still be alive." "You must have hated me so much right before you died, Stella, didn't you?" "How could I ever bear to hate you? I was just a coward. I only hated myself for not being brave enough." The deck was eerily silent, the air heavy as lead, while Brian stood behind them, repeatedly sighing without a word. After a long moment, Henry snapped back to reality and walked back over to Meredith. He violently ripped the diamond necklace from her throat, the thin chain slicing into her flesh and splattering warm blood. "As if I would ever give you anything that belonged to Stella," he said softly. "But then again, trash like you doesn't even deserve a fake. I don't know how you tampered with my memories, but seeing as this ship is quiet, whoever could help you either isn't here yet, or isn't coming at all, are they?" Lifting her mangled face, a sudden realization of absolute terror dawned on her. She screamed, asking if he was insane, reminding him that murder was illegal and asking if he was really willing to throw away the entire Hartwell empire just for me. Henry laughed. "Without her, what the hell do I need Hartwell for?" Pointing out that she had taken my life, he declared that every debt had to be paid. "For the next few days, every single thing you did to Stella will be returned to you 100-fold. I hope you can take it." The yacht remained anchored at sea for 3 days. By the end of it, Meredith had been reduced to an unrecognizable heap of mangled flesh, her once expensive white gown permanently stained with blood and grime. When Brian came to inform Henry, Henry simply ordered her to be thrown into the sea. Brian hesitated, then added that she claimed I had last words for him before I died. Looking up, Henry silently rose and walked toward the door, pausing just before crossing the threshold to ask what he thought I would want to say to him. Unable to bear it, Brian could only sadly call his name, swallowing the rest of his words. I knew Brian could see it too. On the surface, Henry looked exactly like his usual calm, detached self, but his eyes were like the burnt-out ashes of a dead fire, entirely devoid of life, looking as if he could completely shatter at any given second. By the railing, Henry looked down at the ruined thing that used to be Meredith. Kept artificially conscious by massive doses of adrenaline, she felt every ounce of the magnified pain. Knowing she was about to die, she wanted to drag Henry down into hell with her, spitefully recounting every detail of my final moments. "You actually could have saved her. The minute before I killed her, she was on the phone arguing with you. It was you who killed her, Henry. Oh, and right until the end, she thought you already knew how she felt, and she died believing you thought she was a disgusting." She didn't get to finish her sentence because Brian's men moved in. Her body was thrown into the abyss, and men quickly scrubbed the lingering blood from the deck. Once they docked, Henry flew overseas on his private jet to a foreign police station, where he laid eyes on my bloated, pale, rotting corpse. Astonishingly, he felt no fear at all. Instead, a boundless, suffocating agony swelled from his chest, forcing him to double over, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the examination table just to keep from collapsing. A nearby officer eyed him and asked about his relationship to the deceased. Her brother. And, he paused for a fraction of a second, her lover. lover. It wasn't entirely a lie. I had selfishly and dirtily loved him, just as he had cowardly and secretly loved me. We just never got to be in love with each other together. My body was cremated in that unfamiliar city, my ashes placed into a small urn that accompanied him on the flight back home. The bright sunlight streamed through the plane window onto his deathly pale face as he whispered, "I'm sorry, Stella. We're going home now." He laid my ashes to rest in a suburban cemetery, standing before the headstone in absolute silence for an entire night. Pressing my weightless face against his shoulder, I murmured, "Are you still thinking about me?" No one answered, leaving only the sound of the wind sweeping through the narrow walkways. At first, I thought her death would cause some sort of uproar, but a week later, when Henry met with Brian and brought her up, Brian looked thoroughly confused, asking, "Who is Meredith?" "Whatever. It doesn't matter," Brian sighed. "Henry, you have to pull yourself together." Nobody could have predicted Stella accidentally falling into the sea. Henry sharply interrupted, repeating the phrase, "accidentally falling into the sea," in disbelief, to which Brian simply nodded. It clicked instantly. Her mission had failed, resulting in her death, prompting the protocol to wipe her entirely from reality and repair the plot. No one in the world knew the truth of what had happened except for him and me. "That's for the best. I didn't want my death dragging you down anyway," I whispered. Gathering my courage, I held onto his sleeve, following him into the car and back to the house. Next to his study was a locked door that Meredith had once asked about. At the time, he had smoothly lied, saying it was just full of unorganized junk. But now, I finally saw what was inside. It was entirely filled with me. My photos, my paintings, my violin, my old hair ties, worn dresses, and the high school uniform skirt I thought I had inexplicably lost. The keys hit the floor with a sharp clatter. Henry stood in the doorway, his long lashes lowering to hide the storm in his eyes. "I was just so terrified you would find out I was a terrible brother," he confessed. "But even having you hate me would have been infinitely better than you dying." He explained that the morning he woke up with the altered memory, he knew it was utterly impossible because he knew perfectly well he was a monster who harbored illicit thoughts solely for his sister, and fought the massive invisible force trying to make him accept the lie. Dropping to his knees, he clutched tightly at his heart, begging me not to be afraid of him. His eyes were completely bloodshot, stripping away the razor-sharp lethal edge he possessed when executing her on the yacht, leaving him looking as utterly helpless as a lost child calling my name. The agonizing pain in my chest surged forward once again. Sunlight sliced through the windows, illuminating dancing dust motes as an invisible wind tore at my soul, fading my consciousness. I realized with startling clarity that I was about to dissipate for good. "I've had so many dreams about you where it was just us, and I gave into the animal inside me, doing incredibly over-the-line things," I confessed into the silence. "See, I'm just a shameless, immoral sister. My mother was right. I'm weird and awful, and no one but you could ever tolerate me. Who would love a kid that even their own mother despises? Only you. So I don't blame you at all. I just love you, and I only have regrets. If I had lived just a little bit longer, maybe one night when I was drunk, I would have finally snapped and just thrown myself at you." Drifting lightly into his arms, I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him. It was an embrace and a kiss as light and hollow as sea foam, which he naturally couldn't feel. Tears cascaded freely as I smiled through them, whispering, "I miss you so much, Henry. Goodbye." In that instant, my consciousness froze and evaporated into the void. Henry's head snapped up. The room was completely empty, with no one else there. Yet, for just a fraction of a second, he had distinctively felt my presence, hearing my faint, fading voice whisper a goodbye. In the end, he brushed it off, convincing himself it was just a hallucination born from missing me too much. Everyone knew how catastrophically my accidental death had impacted the young ruler of the Hartwell Empire. By the time autumn rolled around, a strange woman with a little girl blocked his car. Introducing herself as Sandra, she claimed his father had been planning to bring him to meet her. Flashing a falsely tender smile, she expressed her condolences, but casually remarked that since I had zero blood relation to him, my death was whatever, and pushed her daughter Zoe forward, declaring her to be his real blood sister. Henry noticed the childish features did bear a slight resemblance to his own. But what did that matter? Offering a smile devoid of any warmth, he stated that he only had one sister, and she was already dead. What? Do you want her daughter to go keep her company? He asked. As the woman flew into a furious, cursing rage, he withdrew his gaze, his face entirely blank, and drove away. The car's audio system was logged into my account, probably left over from a time I had ridden in it. It was a car he rarely drove, making today the first time he had noticed it. He pulled up my most played playlist, ending on the final track, If I Could Turn Back Time. When the song finished, instead of looping back, a familiar voice filled the cabin. It was me. If listening to If I Could Turn Back Time 10,000 times could actually reverse the clock, I would want to go back to the summer I turned 18. No more running in circles, no more hesitation. I just want to be brave, just once. Henry pulled the car to the side of the road, staring out the window at the sky stained with a massive sweep of blood-red clouds, and broke down in tears. He spent the next 4 years methodically organizing the massive family empire, establishing a charity foundation in my name, redistributing corporate shares, and handing the rest to trust funds. On his 30th birthday, the weather was beautiful, the pool water warmed by the sun. A sharp blade sliced through flesh, sending ribbons of scarlet bleeding into the crystal-clear water. Closing his eyes, he sank to the bottom of the pool. Water rushed into his nose and ears, vibrating against his eardrums and producing a sharp ringing noise like popping bubbles directly in his brain. As his consciousness blurred, all the noise faded into the distance, replaced by a thick, heavy fog that poured over him. Within that hazy mist, it was as if he had traveled back through time, arriving right back at the blooming rose wall of the old estate. It was early summer in May, the courtyard pool shimmering with light. My 18th birthday party. Previously, he had fled the scene in a panic after dropping off the necklace, terrified of the disgust in my eyes. But this time, he turned back. Just as he expected, there I was, gripping the pink diamond necklace and looking as dejected as a kicked puppy. Stop talking nonsense. You clearly want to kiss him, I muttered to myself. Should I try to salvage this? Forget it, if he calls me a freak, I wouldn't be able to handle it. I paced back and forth in front of the wall, hopelessly indecisive. Stella, Henry called out. I instantly jerked my head up, meeting my panicked yet faintly hopeful gaze. He quickly closed the distance, wrapping his arm around my slender waist and pulling me tight against his chest. He lowered his head, inching closer. The fog thickened abruptly, a split second before their lips could meet. The vision shattered into nothingness like a broken illusion, leaving behind only an endless, absolute void of darkness. With devastating clarity, Henry realized he was dying, and that it had merely been the final hallucination of a dying man. In the end, they never truly found each other again. The end.